Yeah, hello everybody. We are two brothers and Bitcoin. Here is brother Chad McBain, and I'm brother Luke McBain, and we're talking about Bitcoin. And the news, I mean, so much news has happened in the last couple of months that it's difficult to really keep track of the Bitcoin news. I think maybe we just start off with the biggest piece of news, and let's see if that was really news and what happened exactly and why did the price fall. I mean, there's so much going on at the same time, so many moving parts, which is the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which was just which President Trump just signed. Maybe Chad, you can tell us what happened actually. What did he do? Why did he do it? Does it make
Yeah,
any
sure.
sense? Should he have done it? Maybe he shouldn't have done it. What's the whole point of that?
Yeah, so we're recording, I guess, on the a few days after, but basically a few days ago, President Trump signed an executive order to have a Bitcoin reserve for the U.S. government. Now, that what that means can confuse people. It's not replacing the U.S. Dollar reserves by any stretch. But the United States, oh, as well as many countries, has reserves in many things. So, for instance, a lot of people don't realize this, but the United States has a cheese reserve, believe it or not. And I can't remember what it's valued at, but it's about $1 billion in cheese.
Well, really, $1 billion
Yeah,
in cheese?
yeah. Uh,
What?
I encourage people to Google that. It started many years ago. I guess there's a shortage on cheese or something, and so they decided to always have a cheese reserve. But they've got oil reserves, they've got grain reserves, they've got all kinds of reserves for the country. But the fact that they are now launching a Bitcoin reserve, I think, is a really interesting thing because I think for a lot of people that kind of looked at Bitcoin as something they weren't sure of or whatever. Now they can I guess feel more comfortable with it that the U.S. government's doing it. So uh, we're recording live, so I have to let my dog out. I'll just be 2 seconds.
All right.
I'll have to let her back in a minute. But so yeah, as far as the reserve goes, so they haven't really said, what they're going to do moving forward. They're really looking into it. But currently, the United States has about just over 200,000 Bitcoin that they've acquired through seizure or bankruptcy or whatever of companies or fraudsters. And so they're going to keep that. They're not going to sell it. In the past, they've sold anything that they've acquired like that. So that's probably about 1.6 billion, I guess, in in Bitcoin. I'd have to do the math on that. Bitcoin's probably about 85,000 right now. Um, so that's a lot to start with, but there's plenty of people basically putting forward the idea that they want to get to 1 million Bitcoin over a 5-year period. Whether that comes to pass or not, I do not know. But there is legislation going through Congress, um, and we'll see if those bills get passed. But they've certainly been submitted, and there's actually Senator Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming had submitted that bill last fall, I guess. And as of this week, matter of fact, I believe as of yesterday, there's another senator that's submitted a new bill that's kind of accompanying that, and there's 6 senators that have now endorsed that bill. So it's going to move forward, and we'll see what happens. So it'll be interesting. But as of right now, yeah, the United States is in the Bitcoin world, full steam ahead, and they plan on building a strategic reserve, and they'll, at least for now, anyway, the plan is to hold it and build upon it. So. Just give me 1 sec. So very interesting stuff, and as a result, I think now you're going to see a lot of companies investment funds, whatever, that might have been a little bit shy. Um, I think now that they're going to feel much more comfortable about investing in a commodity that the U.S. government is officially holding and building upon.
But the thing is that what was interesting to see that the price dropped immediately after the this reserve was signed into action, or yeah, into reality, and
Yeah.
and that and it was quite downward drop. And
Yeah.
so why did that happen? Why not be happy and say, wow, well, now we have this Bitcoin reserve, and this is good news. This gives Bitcoin even more credibility, more stability, more future outlook, all of that good stuff.
Well, I think that's coming. I think there's a lot going on right now globally. I'm sure we're not telling anybody who's watching this anything they don't already know, but um, I would say there's several factors to that. The timing actually probably wasn't the greatest because the following day was a new round of tariffs that were announced, which sent the stock market, and therefore, Bitcoin, all things, tumbling down. Um, and I guess the good news is Bitcoin didn't fall as much as some of the stocks did. Um, and the better news is Bitcoin has rebounded much better than most of the stocks have so far. Having said that, it's still down for sure, because everything kind of fell down. Um, these tariff slash trade wars that seem to be going on, which I'm not really opining on it. I'm just saying that they are happening, and it has global markets feeling very insecure about what the immediate future is. Um, President Trump has his theories and his plans, and I think we're going to see this turbulence for a little while longer because just going back to what he campaigned on tariffs, and his rationale, from what I recall, was kind of twofold. One, he believed that enough people wanted or needed to do business with the United States that they should pay for that privilege, and he hoped to take some of that income to reduce income tax on American citizens. I don't know if that's possible. It was done in the past quite successfully, believe it or not, but that was before the formation of the Federal Reserve. So uh, I don't know if that would still work in today's world or not. But that's part of, I guess, his theory. And the other thing, which you don't see much in the media, but he also did campaign on, is he wanted interest rates to come down. The Federal Reserve is not a part of the government, as much as some people like to think it is, and they've been pretty sticky about keeping interest rates high. So there's some that are saying that the Trump administration actually wants to cause a recession to force the Federal Reserve to drop rates. Recessions can be very short term. They can be, just a few months. So I don't know, but the tariff situation certainly got a lot of people concerned in the business community. And I think that's a big reason why the price of Bitcoin went down. I don't think it had anything to do with Bitcoin, to be honest with you. I think it had to do with everything globally. And I think the proof of that is just look at your stock portfolio. It's month over month, definitely in the red. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's all, very good arguments. And there was also some mention that there was some disappointment at this Bitcoin reserve because Bitcoin could only be now acquired in a budget neutral way, which means there are no plans to spend any taxes or additional taxes on the acquisition of Bitcoin as for now, because that, as I understand it, would have to go through Congress, that sort of decision.
yeah,
As you say, there's a Bitcoin bill which is being introduced, probably would include that. And but of course, that's all speculative in terms of, yeah, was there a disappointment on that? And there's another thing which I read, which was I find very interesting, is that I mean, the majority of Bitcoin, which I'm really wasn't aware of, is still in the hands of retail, basically in the hands of individuals, not in the hands of institutions. And
yeah.
there's always this emotional factor about around Bitcoin where people go like, "Oh my God, this is not the reserve we were dreaming of. Let's get rid of it." And then there's a panic or something going on, and that's why you see all these swings. And I don't know. That's part of it. But I was just surprised to read that only 10% of the Bitcoin are actually in institutional hands up to now. So it's not a lot, 10%, if you think it.
No, well, this goes back to, the long-term thesis of why Bitcoin is such a great long-term investment. Because how can I phrase this? When you think about the fact that there's been roughly 19.5 million Bitcoin mined, that there's a 21 million or a million fixed cap. So basically, well over 90% of the available Bitcoin has already been mined. There's not a lot left to be mined. And companies, all of the, BlackRock, Fidelity, um, ARK Invest, I mean, all these companies that are doing these Bitcoin ETFs, all combined, have just over 1.1 million Bitcoin. In other words, the billions and billions, and I think we're into hundreds of billions now that they've spent to acquire this Bitcoin. They've only acquired roughly 5% of the total, which means that all of the rest that you're talking about is in the hands of just regular people. And the vast majority of that Bitcoin, and the great thing about Bitcoin is it's blockchain, so we could see what happens with it. It's transparent. The vast majority of it doesn't really move. Um, so the majority of people, have bought it and hold it, or bought it a long time ago and have just refused to sell it. So you have a situation where, all these big multinational corporations and investment funds and pension funds and hedge funds and sovereign wealth funds and funds are all starting to get into the Bitcoin world and acquire Bitcoin. The truth of the matter is I doubt very much they're ever going to have more than maybe 2.5, 3 million Bitcoin, because most people who've already bought their Bitcoin aren't going to sell it to them. So the good news about that is it'll cause a supply shock at some point. Um, and I think the people that have been holding on to it for a long time will be rewarded in dollar value. But I think there's also the fact that by the time we get to that, do you really want to trade your Bitcoin for dollars? And I would suggest probably not. But the run up will be fun. So no, most Bitcoin is held by retail, and you could call them investors, but they're just mom and pop investors. They're just people that buy Bitcoin and store it away like they would a savings, or a long-term investment. And they don't really watch the market. They don't watch the $10,000 price fluctuations from one day to the next, up or down. And as a result, it's I think a great long-term investment. It's not investment advice. I'm just saying, for me personally, I think it's a great long-term investment, because the vast majority of it actually doesn't move. Most people just hold it for a long term.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole question if, let's say, this Bitcoin reserve, which was put, into reality, was some sort of way of doing like 5D chess. Because if it would have stated something else, or if, I mean, the outcome apparently could not have been that Trump signed into action that they would buy Bitcoin, because it has to go through Congress. But let's say hypothetically it would have, caused a sort of run on Bitcoin, and that also wouldn't have been very good for a lot of people, because then prices would have just exploded, right?
Yeah, and people get left out. And the whole point about Bitcoin, without getting too into the philosophical, is it's freedom money. It's money that governments can't touch. They can't devalue it. They can't inflate it. They can't manipulate it. Um, but what you just suggested, in a way, is kind of artificial manipulation. If they just start buying it, let's just say, and I do know for a fact that many of the people in the Trump administration are former holders of Bitcoin. Now, I say former because a lot of them divested of their Bitcoin to take the positions that they've taken in the administration. But they're certainly believers, and some of them still hold. I know RFK Jr., for example, has stated publicly that more than half of his net worth is in Bitcoin.
Well,
So anyway, I think it shouldn't be manipulated like that, because I think the optics would look bad. I also don't think that the American taxpayer should be worried about their tax dollars being spent on buying Bitcoin. There's plenty of ways for the US government to acquire Bitcoin without spending dollars to do it. They could convert some other assets that they hold that they otherwise were going to sell and just buy Bitcoin with that. For instance, we talked about seizure. So there's uh, the big U.S. exchange. Well, it wasn't actually a U.S. exchange. It was American Citizen, but it was a Bahamian exchange called FTX collapsed a few years ago. Um, some of the proceeds of that would have been not just Bitcoin, but hundreds of different cryptocurrency tokens, crypto tokens, meme tokens, NFT tokens. Well, all that stuff that isn't Bitcoin, they've confiscated a lot of it, so they could sell that and buy Bitcoin. They could just encourage people to pay in Bitcoin. Say if you want to pay your property taxes or your income tax in Bitcoin, go ahead and do it. There's different ways they could do it without actually taking taxpayer money and buying Bitcoin. I'm not comfortable with that idea. I don't think government should be in the hedge fund business. If you want to acquire or accumulate through other ways, then absolutely, government should build reserves in gold and oil and Bitcoin and in all kinds of things, in cheese apparently. Um, but I don't think they should be going out and spending a ton of taxpayer money on it. That's for sure. So I think this is a great thing for Bitcoin. I think it's a great thing for the U.S. government. I think they've positioned themselves very well for the future. You and I are of a certain generation, and we are have a decent understanding of this. But people that are 25, 30 years younger than us, they understand this in a way that I think would really surprise a lot of people. And they look at Bitcoin as quite frankly, a real store of value and probably money someday, a currency someday, when the price stabilizes. So I think the United States government is just taking initial steps to make sure that they don't get left out. Um, we've already seen that. We now know because they've admitted it. There are multiple countries in the world mining Bitcoin, acquiring Bitcoin. Some of them are friendly countries to the United States. Some of them are not friendly. So I think you call it 5D chess. At the very least, we're playing chess. I think. So I think the U.S. government was is an intelligent move to stay on top of an emerging trend in an emerging market.
Yeah, I mean, talking about chess, yeah, also in terms of game theory, I think the news is completely being underestimated, or people are only looking at the price and going like, well, this is a nothing burger, this strategic Bitcoin reserve, and look at the price. But what they're not thinking about is this aspect of game theory that, of course, other actors are also watching this, which means also other countries are watching this and are now, of course, thinking, well, if the United States is doing this, shouldn't we be doing the same? Like, do we want to be left out of this game of Bitcoin acquisition or adding this to our, national reserve and so on and so forth? So I think that's certainly one outflow of this. And since governments are slow, the reaction is not immediate, but there is going to be one. It's to be expected that other countries will respond in some way, or might say, well, we're more agile than the United States and we're going to put ourselves ahead of them. I think there's also some numbers about, China, how much Bitcoin China actually owns and how much Russia owns. And that I saw some statistics as China actually has more Bitcoin than the United
Yeah,
States. And is this then, can the United States actually, is this acceptable for the United States? Probably not. Like they will say it's not acceptable for us that they have more Bitcoin than us. And
yeah,
so, there's this type of game theory then going on where, the players are looking at each other and saying, what are the other players doing? And
right.
this will, of course, impact Bitcoin massively over the next couple of years. I mean, things are just going to start moving, yeah,
Yeah,
slowly but
well,
surely.
I think you bring up a great point. Um, the U.S. announcing this has kind of brought other people to the table publicly, but China didn't acquire that Bitcoin last week. So they've acquired that Bitcoin over time. I don't know how much time, but all of a sudden we now find out that, oh, China has 300,000 Bitcoin or 400,000 Bitcoin, and Putin has already stated that they now want to start mining and acquiring some Bitcoin. They haven't talked about doing a reserve or anything like that, but he has said that Russia will be acquiring Bitcoin in various ways, and he's also made Bitcoin legal now for Russian citizens to hold as a commodity and as an investment, not as a currency. But that's recent as well. So now I don't know if it's all Russian citizens or just just his friends and
Okay.
supporters. But anyway, I mean, it's still game theory. Well, what else? Saudi Arabia has been making inroads and publicly stating that, oh, they're looking into things. Well, if you're publicly stating that you're looking into things as a sovereign nation, then you've probably already done your research and made a decision. Um, we talked in a previous episode, I believe it was the ruler of Abu Dhabi flying to meet the president of El Salvador last spring. What would they have to talk about other than Bitcoin? And now we know for a fact that a Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund has been buying a lot of Bitcoin over the last few months. Probably, if we look on chain on the blockchain, I know others have, and it's kind of coincides with Trump's with Trump's statements back in the summer last year of he was going to be coming up with a strategy to get Bitcoin. So, I think game theory has been in effect actually for a while, and we're seeing it play out publicly. But I think it's been going on behind the scenes for a while. And an interesting thing that was brought up recently that I was watching was you said that China has more Bitcoin than the United States, and they do, but China doesn't have more Bitcoin than Americans overall. And so what
Okay.
that means is if you look at the amount of Bitcoin that individual Americans hold or American public companies, aka strategy, formerly MicroStrategy, um, it does, MicroStrategy has far more Bitcoin than China does.
Oh yeah,
Um,
right. Yeah,
uh,
true.
Sorry, they just changed their name to Strategy, but formerly MicroStrategy, now Strategy. Um, so, in a true game theory, if things were to get a little bit crazy, the U.S. might just nationalize some of these companies and just say, "Well, here's your here's your payout. Thanks for your Bitcoin." Uh, so I do think the U.S. would like to acquire more Bitcoin. However, I don't know that they are losing too much sleep at night because there's a lot of American companies and a lot of American individuals that mine, hold, and have acquired a ton of Bitcoin. Now, I haven't added it all up, but I'm sure it comes to well over a million Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, Strategy alone has over 500,000 Bitcoin. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah. So,
Well, you sent me a talk about game theory and reactions by other countries. You sent me also this article. Maybe we could just have a short look at it. And it says
sure.
EU worries U.S. embrace of crypto assets could impact Europe financial stability. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That sounds nasty. Uh, I read it. I didn't quite understand. I mean, I didn't really understand how it could undermine Europe's financial stability because I think the article is not very explicit about that.
Well, I
Policy,
don't think I
yeah,
don't think the European Union's financial leaders have been very explicit as to how. I mean, you're in a better position than I am to probably opine on this. But from the outside looking in, when I read this, and then I watched Christine Lagarde's comments this week. Um, Christine Lagarde's the head of the European Central Bank, for those that aren't aware. Um, I couldn't make sense of it either. I thought, how does the U.S. acquiring Bitcoin, how does that affect the sovereignty of the euro dollar, uh, or the currency of the European Union? I don't even understand what they're saying. So I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here, and you can opine on this. Um, from the outside looking in, as a Westerner, it looks like Western ideology in Europe has been changing over the years, and a lot of the stuff that they've been doing seems a little bit more centralized and controlled. And I think that they've made it very clear this week that they want to launch a central bank digital currency um, this fall. And I think the U.S. embracing Bitcoin terrifies them because it kind of says to the rest of the world, as you stated earlier, there's a bit of a game theory going on, and I think the European Union was hoping to have a little bit more control over its financial what would you call it, monitoring of the people. And Bitcoin, of course, is the antithesis to that. It's the opposite. It's no control by government, or control by individuals. So the way I read this, I could only surmise, and I'm completely speculating here, that they're just concerned that Europeans will take notice and won't be as quick to take up maybe their euro currency or their central bank European currency that they plan on launching this fall. I'm not sure, but to me it sounded like a knee-jerk reaction that made no sense. I don't understand the connection between the U.S. Bitcoin reserve and European currency sovereignty.
Here's an interesting point of this gentleman here. He says the U.S. administration stance on this compared to the past has changed. The U.S. administration is favorable towards cryptocurrencies and especially dollar denominated stable coins such as Tether, which may raise certain concerns in Europe that it could reignite foreign and U.S. tech giants' plans to launch mass payment solutions based on dollar-denominated stable coins, he said, referring to digital assets pegged to the greenback. So I guess it goes even a step further than that, that you say, well, is Bitcoin going to be a rival to the digital euro or not? They're more going towards stable coins and payment solutions over US tech platforms where they go like, well, do we really want our citizens paying on X or Facebook for certain stuff in stablecoin, for example, or Tether, or even Bitcoin, who knows, or Ethereum. Um, and that's
Yeah.
that's a question of sovereignty, because then the United States said, as you say, there's this discourse going on, this debate that the United States is even hinting at, why is free speech of US citizens even impaired by EU regulations? There's this going on, and maybe it's not just about free speech. Maybe they're going to go a step further and say not only free speech, but we would like our companies to do business in Europe, even on with, some digital currency, which we accept in the United States as part of our reserve or whatever it is. I don't know. That's the scenario which is being put out there. I don't know if that's a realistic scenario, but that would sort of mean a real uh, threat to a digital euro.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there.
And we only have 2 minutes, by the way.
Well,
So
yeah, we'll have to bring it up again in another topic, but I would just say that I think a lot of what you said there as speculation is got a lot of meat on that idea. We can unpack it in another time, another podcast. And I would suggest that your speculations are probably more accurate than you realize. Again, we're talking about game theory, but now we're talking about a bigger game theory. Um, and I mean, you're in the heart of it, but it's pretty obvious to most American business leaders that Europe is not happy about the fact that um, most popular social media platforms, um, internet platforms, big tech, they're all basically coming out of America with one or two exceptions. Nothing has come out of Europe. Quite frankly, I don't know when the last time anything has come out of
except
Europe.
Spotify, as I just learned.
Well, Spotify's Canadian, I believe, isn't it?
Really? I thought it was. Okay, I thought,
Let's Google it.
oh, we only have 1 more minute.
Well, why don't we sign off? But we'll definitely bring this up because I think you're really onto something here, and I think it's something a lot of people should pay attention to, particularly people in your neck of the woods. Yeah.
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 Okay, so we'll have to make this a cliffhanger, and yeah, okay, we'll do that,
Dun,
and
dun.
and clarify where is Spotify, where does it come from, who is it, who owns it, and
Yeah.
we'll put it in the video description. If we don't follow up on it, I'll put it in the video
Sounds
description.
good.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.